Hello, people of the internet. My name is JD Shadow. I need to talk about the Hong Kong incident and the kerfuffle that has been taking the internet by storm within the past month or so. In case you have no idea, the whole basis centers around a streamer who won a Hearthstone tournament and then decided to say free Hong Kong, among a few other things, and the two commentators were rather joyous about it. Blizzard in turn banned the guy for a year and took away his prize money, firing the commentators who had taken joy in it. Of course, this set off a huge firestorm of people who were not really happy to see that Blizzard was in fact censoring somebody and created the very first firestorm about this topic. Keep in mind that there was no ulterior motive there whatsoever. There was no evidence to be presented that they had an ulterior motive as to why they would be called quote-unquote bad actors or anything of the sort. Keep that in mind because we're about to get into what is bothering me these past couple of weeks about the mainstream media that is covering this now. Because it does seem as if they are doing whatever they can and are taking full advantage of the notion that certain people are the ones that are calling it out first, and because they have a prior beef, some prior grudge with them on another topic, they're going to try to do some sort of mental gymnastics into getting people to believe that it's the mainstream media who called it out first and not these other people, and the other people are either bad actors, they're not really worried about the Hong Kong debate, or they are trying to co-opt it themselves for their own nefarious purposes. And it's important to note that one of the facts that had been uncovered prior to the mainstream media getting a hold of this and starting to vilify people who first called it out were the ones that talked about a company called Tencent, who owns less than 4.9% of the shares as of 2017 of Activision Blizzard. And it is them that has a lot of the pull because China is a pretty important market, at least for Activision Blizzard, and they can't afford to lose that. And keep in mind that China right now is pretty freaking draconian about what you say or what you cannot be allowed to say. That's why the whole thing went down the way it did in the first place. Now, Blizzard had released what you could probably call a half-hearted apology. I wouldn't even call it that. I wouldn't even go that far. And they did lessen the guy's punishment to, I believe, 6 months. And as I recall correctly, I believe I'm getting this right, he was allowed to have that money. No word as of yet, as I recall, on the two people who were fired for taking joy in what he said. Keep that in mind. And this has only heightened the firestorm. This has only made things worse. And Blizzard is refusing to address the core issue that right in the moment, there is a huge problem going on in which, because Tencent has so much pull and China has so much draconianism about this issue that they will suppress free speech regardless of what side of the fence you are on, that they are going to essentially start censoring video games abroad. They're going to look for regional parity. They're going to look for, if you're going to censor it here, you need to censor it there. That is the problem that we now face. They are not getting the major problem that we now face. And it has led to people protesting at BlizzCon 2019 and them saying that Blizzard doesn't get it. They keep offering these new games and that's great, but they're not addressing it. They're not just coming out and talking about this. They're not actively going into great detail about what is going on here and what they are planning to do in order to, at the very least, put our minds at ease that what we fear might actually happen will not happen. That if China needs to have their content censored, and keep in mind that Australia is the same way, in a way that over here in the US the same things won't get censored because of regional parity, and that's the whole problem that we now face. And that's because we have seen things get censored because of morality issues and whatnot when something gets translated from another country to the US, because we have so much problems addressing these issues as adults and depend on social media and hot takes to get our message out, to get the news. And that's not the way we need to have an intelligent conversation about very serious issues that are there right now. And what that has allowed is for things like this. What you're seeing on the screen right now is an article from Kotaku which broke the back for me. This is the one that had gotten me to say, okay, now I do really have to say something, because I have seen certain people address it in this way, and I think, yeah, this is something that needs to be addressed. This is something that we need to settle down upon. But it's this guy right here, a guy who has no right to be talking about this sort of thing the way he is, talking about this the way he is. Now I'm going to show you the offending paragraph. This article is talking about what Fight for the Future, a progressive leaning organization that is going to great detail to try to do something about this whole thing, and good on them for doing so, but I do question what exactly this one moderator is doing and what he said there. So I'm going to show you the offending paragraph. I am not going to read you what it says. I'm going to show it to you and you can read it for yourself. Now, there's a reason behind this, because Nathan Grayson, if you do not know, got into the major controversy in 2014 that had to do with journalistic nepotism and journalistic transparency and the lack of it. And instead of owning up to the mistake, regardless of how it was revealed to the public of what was going on, and it was an article that was written that was the offending article. No review was being questioned to have not been made. Those are the facts. Him and the person that he decided to cover for instead blamed the people who called it out, labeled the people who called it out, and when somebody pressed on and people keep pressing on, they kept upping the ante about what their rhetoric and their defense was going to be, which was to attack and vilify those who called it out. And in the meantime, people who sought to use this whole thing for more nefarious purposes decided to co-opt it and lose the entire meaning about what was going to be argued about. And because all those different sensitive things ended up intersecting with one another, everything got lost about what exactly was being debated about. And it led to the media having an easy way out to vilify everybody instead of the select few who co-opted the whole thing to make it something it was never supposed to be. So you're now reading that particular excerpt from this article, the one that really got to me. And again, I am not going to read to you what this says. You can no doubt read this for yourself. And the reason that I'm not going to read it out loud to you is because there's a certain word that gets brought up to describe what this was. And it seems like every time that word even gets uttered in any form of context, people lose their minds. Even though the ones that keep bringing it up, the only ones that keep bringing it up are the ones that hate everything they thought it stood for, or everything that they wanted you to think it stood for, because they did not want to do anything about the actual reason why they got called out in the first place. So that leads to what I'm about to say. First of all, Nathan Grayson has absolutely no right to pretend that he gives a crap about what happens in Hong Kong. These people who keep trying to divide this whole thing, divide the people who care about this issue because they have some sort of grudge because they got called out too at one point in time and they can't seem to move on with their lives, and seem to try to group them in with people who were really nefarious, and good for them to call them out. But you want to lump everybody else in with it because they decided that they had enough of the lack of transparency that you had throughout the years? And then you're using this, a real serious issue that can affect everybody abroad beyond the borders of China, beyond where we stand now when it comes to this Hearthstone player, why in the world should we take you seriously? This should be a slam dunk case. You have so much bipartisan support. You have so much support that all you could say is, if even they, the people who we despise, who we hate, are not with you on this subject, China, then that means you have a real big problem. That's all you have to say. That's all you really need to do. And you can say, hey, if even people who we would never agree with on any other issue suddenly say, you know what, we have so much bipartisan support, we have nearly unanimous support against this whole practice, then what's going to happen is that China will have no choice but to address this issue, or Blizzard to address this issue. But instead, what you are choosing to do is to divide these people in one of the weirdest ways I've ever seen anybody try to divide people. And we all know the reason why, and it does not end with Nathan Grayson. It didn't begin with him, but it definitely got me going, because this shows exactly what they are doing. They are mad that they were not the first ones to call this out. They were not the first ones to reveal or to say, no, this is not okay. This is a huge problem. We need to take care of this right now. And to not rest until something is resolved here to a satisfactory conclusion. And this was something that everybody got on the mainstream media to cover and to say something about, because they would have a lot more pull, regrettably and admittedly, than some random people on the internet might. Although we've seen how some of these internet movements have led to some people being able to make some form of change. You are mad that these same people who called you out at one point in time, and you never did anything about it, you never bothered to lift a finger to help to solve the issue of journalistic transparency, since it still continues on to where the people who are on YouTube have to disclose when they get sponsored, when they get the sponsored deals, but print media is still not required to do that. They still are allowed to not tell you when they are getting sponsored to say something. They are doing things on their end that if people on YouTube were to do that, they would get an FTC violation. Keep that in mind. That's all this was ever about. But because they weren't the ones to call it out first, they seem as though they are not that happy about it. But they believe they have this opening. They believe they have this sort of door creeping open to where they can still vilify the people who first called it out and call them bad actors, because at one point in time, whatever they were trying to fight for got co-opted with some really horrible human beings, and that gave them the way out at that point in time in order to not do anything at all about what they were getting called out upon and say, hey, they're just saying this because of this and that, and not really care about what was really going on, even though it was going on and still is going on to this very day, and use sensitivities of those people who generally do care about progression and equal opportunity among races or sexual orientation or genders or ethnicities or anything in between. Suddenly, you find a way to vilify those people and say, hey, they're not the ones you need to listen to because they also believe in this or that, which you have no real way to prove that the majority of those people ever believed in the disgusting and nefarious things that you're claiming that they believed in, that the majority of those believed in. You put everybody into a box and gave them this label to which they can't escape from to this very day, and you have been giddy to have accomplished such a feat. And now what happens is that you're claiming that you're the ones who first called this out. That you called out that this guy got fired, or these two guys got fired, and this one guy got banned because he dared to call for the liberation of Hong Kong. Something that every single sane person in the United States, or any sane person in the world, when seeing what is going on in China, would call for. And that is shameful. That is extremely shameful to say and to claim that these people don't really care about what is going on, because at one point in time, they called you out and you want to claim whatever it is you're claiming, whatever hysteria, because it's really easy for someone to believe you with the way people are right in the moment and how people are not willing to take a step back and to breathe for a second before they believe whatever hysteria comes off of a hot take on Twitter right now, when all you really have to say is to say that Blizzard needs to look at how bipartisan this is. If even the people who are claiming this and that are also against you for doing this, this shows how unpopular this is. This is showing how utterly repulsive this is for you to censor anything because of this whole situation, and to just say, hey, we're not going to censor anything that comes to the US because of this whole thing that's going on in China. And Blizzard, all they have to say is, hey, we know right in the moment things are a little bit tense in China and we have to worry about this whole thing, and there's nothing really we can do about it until things change as far as laws are concerned there. But keep in mind that that's not going to affect anybody's enjoyment of the game here in the States, because we're not going to do this regional parity thing that we're seeing people getting hysterics about. That's going to happen. Instead, it's complete radio silence. And this could be the most slam dunk thing that they could possibly have. This is an open and shut case. This is so simple. And yet, instead of doing the reasonable thing, the most honorable thing, and saying that everybody's against them, they instead try to do these mental gymnastics in order to try to still resurrect the ghosts of the past. Because for some reason, they still can't get over that they were called out. This is disgusting, the way that Nathan Grayson raised this issue. And here's the big thing. If the people from Fight from the Future is letting this happen on their Discord to go on the basis of a group and the prejudice about a certain group, which, by the way, doesn't actually exist. There's no group that's called this. There's no official group that is named this, and are not basing it on the terms of the individuals that go into their Discord and talk about this issue and want to discuss this issue like normal adults, then they need to be called out as well. And I'm sorry that it has to be this way, because I do agree with 99% of what they stand for. They stand for net neutrality. That's a great thing. They stand for equal rights among the internet. That is a great thing. But if this is how they're going to act to this issue, if this is something that they're going to say, hey, if you are for journalistic transparency, you're gone. Or if they go and say that because of guilt by association, you are also gone, without taking into account whether or not the person that is joining ever believed in what Nathan Grayson or this guy said that these people believed in the first place, then that creates a bigger problem, especially if the people on the higher ups are allowing this to happen. Now, first of all, it is interesting to note that Kotaku did get this wrong. The people who own the Discord in question are not Fight for the Future. They had partnered with Gamers for Freedom, who are the owners of the Discord. And XY is just a moderator, someone who, when I looked through the Discord, seems as though there's some small controversy that's going on right now with this particular moderator. And as of the time I'm recording this video, it does not seem as though there is any removal of people on this basis. However, they could have deleted them, they could have deleted the offending content or whatnot, and there seems to be no rules to specify that they are going to ban people on the basis that they belong to one special interest group or another one, as long as they are respectful to other people and that they don't chastise anybody for another political viewpoint, which is kind of interesting given what Kotaku is reporting here. And you don't do the normal harassing or spamming or trolling or what have you. Nothing to suggest that they would take any kind of action to anybody outside of those reasons. However, given that there was a bit of a talk in the Discord concerning this particular moderator, and this person saying that perhaps it was the wrong person to promote up to being a moderator, gives the suggestion that there might be a rogue moderator who is on their own agenda and is trying to divide people in this manner. Since there is only speculation there, that's probably going to be the only time you hear that. However, keep this in mind as you hear the rest of what I have to say. There needs to be solidarity on this issue, and right in the moment, if this is happening, if this is really happening the way that Kotaku is reporting it, and remember, this is Kotaku, so we gotta take things with a grain of salt, because we know for a fact that Kotaku has been called out for not being exactly faithful or truthful in their reporting, then some major questions need to be addressed, because they should not be judging people solely on that, on a case-by-case basis, on an individual-by-individual basis. If an individual comes in and say that, hey, they are not for transgender rights, then yeah, they should be taken to task. They should be called out on that. But if someone is calling in and saying, hey, I believe in true journalistic transparency, and they, by guild association, are also gone, that creates a big problem. And that shows to China and to Blizzard that they are not taking this seriously. And there is division, and thus they will not act the way that we need them to act upon this ASAP. We should stand in this together as gamers, as people who care about what is going on Hong Kong right now. Because what if it was us? You have seen how Donald Trump treats the media right now. What if it gets worse than that? What if it becomes a dictatorship at some point in time? And I don't think it will. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that it is going to happen. But if it did, wouldn't you want as many people as possible to be on your side? And you can argue all you want about the other things that you are for or against at a later time. This is not like you agreeing with a terrorist group or anything like that. That is not what this is. And yes, we do need a big discussion about journalistic transparency, both in the gaming spectrum and abroad, actually. We need to have that discussion. We've never had that. We never had an honest discussion about that because it got drowned out in that other garbage that ended up co-opting that old debate and gave the journalists a way out of it. The only reason that Nathan Grayson even cares about this is because at one point in time he got called out by those same people who were the first people to have said something about this Hong Kong thing. If they didn't say anything, the journalistic mainstream media would have never said a word. Kotaku, Nathan Grayson would have never said a word. PC Gamer would have never said a word about this. And I implore you that perhaps Nathan Grayson was the one to ask the question about the particular word. And perhaps that's what has gotten to that breaking point. Because why is it that that word keeps getting used? The majority of those who actually cared about journalistic transparency have let that word die. So maybe it's time that you guys did as well. If you in the mainstream media, if you guys from Kotaku and Polygon or RPS or wherever you're coming from, really care about the things that are going on in Hong Kong and really want to help out, you would, instead of trying to vilify the rest of them, instead of trying to vilify those people because they called you out at one point in time, maybe show that in this one instance, you have solidarity. You have bipartisan support. You have this unanimous support. You have unity. You have solidarity. Something that is sorely needed and is rarely seen in this day and age in American politics. You have unanimous support here, and it would be very hard for you to screw it up when you have that. So why are you finding a way to screw it up? How are you finding a way to try to divide people on this, the one thing that you would have unanimous support on? Stop doing that on this one issue for once in your lives. Put away this divisiveness for once. It is not hard. Why is it that hard to just say on this one thing, we don't care what side you're on here. We are on the same side on this issue. And if you do that, maybe Blizzard will act a lot more and a lot better than they have been. The only people that can screw it up at this point are the people who are right now finding a way somehow to screw this up. Stop doing it, or we're never going to get anywhere. But I'm not going to hold my breath to see anyone listen to those words when they seem to have their own damn agenda. Thank you for watching. Please like if you enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments down below, and please keep it civil, and please subscribe for more geek gaming culture. I try to do these as much as I can. Until next time, my name is JD Shadow, and that just happened.